June 8, 1972, the town of Trang Bang, Tay Ninh Province, South Vietnam, became the epicenter of one of the most shocking images of the 20th century. Amid a clash between the South Vietnamese government forces and the North Vietnamese troops, fighter planes from the south dropped napalm bombs on the contested area. Among the fleeing civilians was a group of children running chaotically down a village road, engulfed by smoke, fire, and screams. One of them was Phan Thị Kim Phúc, just 9 years old at the time. A napalm bomb had exploded near her hiding place, severely burning her skin. Her clothes were incinerated, her body exposed, her flesh blistered and bleeding. Instinctively she ran, naked and in agony, screaming for help. That exact moment was captured by Nic Ut, a Vietnamese photojournalist working for the Associated Press. The black and white photo showed a naked girl crying in pain, surrounded by other children, running through a war-torn landscape. Immediately after taking the photo, Nic Ut and British journalist Christopher Wayne rushed Kim Phuc to a hospital in Saigon. She suffered third-degree burns over more than 30% of her body, and doctors didn't believe she would survive. "I didn't just take the photo and leave," Nic Ut later said. "I had to do something. She was just a child." The photo was published in hundreds of newspapers around the world, featured on the front page of the New York Times, and sparked an unprecedented outcry against the war. It earned the Pulitzer Prize in 1973 and became a global symbol of civilian suffering in wartime. But while the world gasped and politicians gave speeches, Kim Phuc, the girl in the photo, was thrust into a very different journey: the fight to stay alive. There were no more cameras in the recovery room, no applause, no declarations, only scorched skin, months of unbearable pain, and a haunting question left unanswered. What happened to the girl in the photo after the world stopped looking? If this story speaks to you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, human-centered history. Comment below, what do you think truly changed the world about this photo? The recovery process took many years. She had to endure 17 surgeries, primarily for skin grafts, treatment of contracture scars, and pain relief. Her injuries made it impossible for her to lie on her side, wear tight clothing, or escape the dull, lingering pain that often lasted for hours. Her body was burned, but the greater pain was within. When she left the hospital and returned to everyday life, Kim Phuc began facing the gaze of those around her. Peers were curious. Adults often stayed silent. She felt different. In a society that rarely spoke of psychological trauma after war, Kim Phuc grew up in silence. No one taught her how to cope with the shock. No one told her that feeling angry, ashamed, or lonely was understandable. "I never want to look at that photo," Kim Phuc later shared in an interview. "Because every time I do, I remember the feeling of being burned. I don't see myself as a historical figure. I just see a wounded little girl." Ironically, the very image that saved her life, the photo taken by Nic Ut, became an invisible burden. It was printed everywhere, in international newspapers, school textbooks, peace conferences, and war exhibitions. Yet Kim Phuc, the girl in the photo, was never asked if she agreed. She had no control over how her story was told. Throughout her childhood and teenage years, she was constantly referred to as a symbol, but no one really knew how she was living, what she was thinking, or how much she was hurting. She had no choice. She couldn't forget, nor could she hide. Kim Phuc began learning to live with two realities. One was herself, a young woman covered in scars. The other was the image, a symbol the world once mourned. Between those two realities lay a silent void, stretching not only through the years of recovery but also throughout her journey to reclaim her identity. After her recovery, Kim Phuc returned to school and lived with her family in southern Vietnam. The scars caused by the napalm bomb left her with both physical and emotional burdens. But she tried to live like a normal young girl, nurturing the dream of becoming a doctor. After finishing high school, she passed the entrance exams and enrolled in the University of Medicine and Pharmacy in Ho Chi Minh City. Throughout her studies, she continued to be referred to as the girl in the napalm photo, even though she never wished for such attention. In 1982, Kim Phuc converted from Cao Dai to Christianity. In later interviews, she shared that her faith helped her heal from the deep psychological wounds left by the war, a turning point in her inner journey. In 1986, she was sent by the Vietnamese government to study abroad in Cuba. At the time, Vietnam and Cuba had a special allied relationship, and Cuba was one of the key destinations for international students to study medicine, engineering, and education. Her early days in Havana marked a new chapter in her life. Far from home, far from the critical gaze at her appearance, and far from the memories of war. Yet the image of the napalm girl still followed her, especially whenever international media brought up the Vietnam War. In Cuba, she continued her education, lived introspectively, and began to open up more. It was there that she met her future husband, another Vietnamese student studying abroad. Even on the other side of the world, Kim Phuc still felt something was holding her back from true freedom. She held no hatred, but longed for a life of her own, a life where she could simply be herself, no longer tied to a past moment defined by others. September 1992. A flight carrying Kim Phuc and her husband Bui Huy Tuan departed from Cuba with a layover in Gander, Newfoundland, a small coastal town in eastern Canada. They carried valid Vietnamese passports and legal documents, with one simple plan: to spend their honeymoon in Moscow. But Kim Phuc and Tuan never boarded their connecting flight. At Gander Airport, they applied for political asylum with the Canadian government. After more than a decade of living as a symbol of war, she decided, for the first time, to write her own story. I couldn't go back. If I did, I would be imprisoned again in the shadow of that photograph. I wanted to live the life I chose. They had no acquaintances in Canada, no property, no fluency in the language, and no idea what the future held. But they had freedom and faith. The Canadian government granted them asylum and helped them settle in Toronto. In the early months, everything was a challenge: the language, the weather, the culture, and the daily struggle to survive. Kim Phuc began learning English from scratch, took on part-time jobs, and worked hard to integrate into the local community. Life in their new home wasn't easy, but to her, freedom was a gift beyond measure. No one could tell her what to say, what to do, or what to represent anymore. In 1994, she became a Canadian citizen. She and her husband began building a new life in the town of Ajax, Ontario. They had 2 sons, and life gradually found its rhythm. Yet the memory of the photograph remained, not as a chain, but as a reminder. She understood that no matter how far she went, she would always carry the scars of history, both on her body and in her soul. I can't change the past, but I can choose how to live with it. In the years that followed, Kim Phuc slowly re-entered the public eye, this time as herself. No longer the girl running from the bomb, but a grown woman with her own voice, ready to tell her story from a place of humanity, not politics. Even so, she understood that the photograph from 1972 would forever be a part of her life, and if she could not forget it, then she would choose to live with it, through forgiveness. I forgive the pilot who dropped the bomb on my village. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but if I didn't forgive, I would never truly be free. That was a message Kim Phuc shared at many international peace events. To her, forgiveness was not weakness, it was strength, the power to rise above hatred. From that belief, she began a new journey, not to escape the past, but to confront it and transform it. In 1996, she founded the Kim Foundation International, a charitable organization dedicated to helping children who are victims of war and armed conflict. With the support of the United Nations and other global organizations, the foundation has provided aid to thousands of children in countries such as Afghanistan, Uganda, Iraq, and Vietnam. Her name became known not for the photograph, but for what she did afterward. Kim Phuc emerged as a global inspirational speaker, delivering talks at TEDx events, major churches, Oxford University, and even the United Nations headquarters. Every word she spoke, with a gentle but powerful voice, was the distillation of pain, resilience, and compassion. I am no longer a victim. I am a witness, and I choose to speak the voice of hope. In 1997, she was named a UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador for Peace. It was more than just a title. It was a recognition of someone who had turned personal tragedy into humanitarian action. She also reunited with Nick Ut, the photographer who had saved her life decades earlier. They became close friends, working together on campaigns to end violence against children. From a naked child fleeing the fires of war, Kim Phuc has become a global symbol of forgiveness, compassion, and peace. But unlike in the past, this time, she chose to be seen. And for the first time, her story is being told in her own voice. After years of sharing her story around the world, Kim Phuc still carried a quiet wish deep in her heart, to return to the place where it all began. Not to reclaim the past, but to face it one last time, as someone who had forgiven. On a visit to Vietnam many years after settling in Canada, she returned to Trang Bang, the place where on June 8, 1972, she had run from the sea of fire. Standing on the same road, now smoothly paved and bustling with traffic, Kim Phuc gazed silently at the trees, the rooftops, and the wind that seemed to carry echoes of old screams. No more smoke, no more cameras, only the woman who had survived. Back then, I ran away from this place. Today I return in peace. She visited a small village temple where many civilians once took shelter from the bombs. She spoke with young people who knew little about the war and with elders who had witnessed that fateful day. In their eyes, Kim Phuc was no longer the Napalm girl, but a daughter returning home, bringing with her the story of a generation. But deep inside, she knew she still carried the memories of millions who never had the chance to tell theirs. With her family in Canada, Kim Phuc found comfort in love. She is the mother of 2 sons, living a quiet life with the husband who has stood beside her since their days in Cuba. The pain from her scars still flares up. She still needs regular physical therapy, but she has learned to listen to her body and to forgive fate. Around the world, she continues her journey of sharing, not to speak of war, but of healing, not to retell the old story, but to spread a new message. I will never forget, but I have forgiven. I am not the photograph. I am a human being. The 1972 photograph still appears in museums, textbooks, lectures on war and media, but now beside it stands a new image of Kim Phuc, a woman with a gentle voice, calm eyes, and open hands reaching out to others. When asked what brings her the greatest peace, she simply replies, "It's knowing that I didn't let hatred consume me. I live, I love, and I believe that is my victory." If this story touched you, please share, subscribe, and leave a comment below. What does forgiveness mean to you?